Hey, Chief.
Hey, Cyrus.
How are you doing today?
Not bad. How about you?
Excellent. So this will be part 2 of talking about the comic book industry's issues.
Yes.
For this one, I really just wanted to address the long history of the comic book industry.
Sure.
And how many of these different companies keep all of their characters in the same universe.
Mm-hmm.
And why that's a problem.
Yes.
So let's just begin with something really simple. Last time we talked about how the comic book industry has been here since, 1932?
38.
38. So it's been here for a very long time.
Yes.
And Superman, being the first, real superhero that we had in the comic book industry, he's had a little bit of trouble being translated into current times. Why do you think that is?
Part of me think it's because the people who writes them tries to fit into the modern, way people perceive things.
Sure.
As opposed to the way that Superman perceived things.
Makes sense.
Which is kind of interesting. But this reminds me of a time when I was in Marvel Comics.
Right.
There was an issue of Spider-Man where, like any other Spider-Man story, where he was saving a subway full of people. And the editor in charge at the time, this actually ran around the office. The editor at the time, who was in charge of Spider-Man, said, "Why would Spider-Man go do that? Because if I were Spider-Man, I wouldn't be saving these people." I mean, how bizarre is that? The editor himself made this comment about Spider-Man, that if he was Spider-Man, he wouldn't go save these people.
But he's not Spider-Man.
He's not Spider-Man. But that's kind of the problem with, I think, a lot of writers who writes the character. They don't think about who these characters are. They just think who they are and how they will approach the situation.
Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah.
One of the other issues that can be tied into that is the fact that the longer a comic book character is around, the harder it is to be able to say something new and interesting about them.
Yes, that's always been difficult.
You can only write so many arcs that are interesting and great.
Yes.
And
yes, because you can say, and this is an old saying in the industry too, there's nothing new under the sun.
Makes sense.
Everything that's been done before has been done in the comic book industry. It is very difficult to come up with something new and fresh and different. It's not impossible. I think you just have to put in the effort.
Sure.
But then a lot of times you have people who work in the industry that either don't put in the effort or don't have the right mindset to make it work.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's okay if it's only one character, in my opinion.
Yes.
But if you have an entire universe full of characters like that, that you have to maintain continuity for, that can be really difficult.
Yes.
Because there are different writers having to work on different parts of the property. And
Yes.
whenever they cross over, you want to make sure that they're actually available for that. You can't have Thor working with the Avengers if he's supposed to be halfway across the universe or something.
Yes.
Unless you're just going to retcon it later.
Well, see, that is an interesting thing you brought about, because most people don't even know about this. Maybe even people who work at Marvel don't know about this now. But when I was at Marvel, there used to be a submission form each editorial department have to send to another editorial department. Meaning, if the Avengers, editorial department have to now feature a Spider-Man character or Spider-Man villain, they have to send a request form.
Right.
To the Spider-Man department to get permission to use that character. And that was something that Marvel used to do to keep continuity, intact. But I remember when I was there, toward the end, before the fall happens, there was one time, and I forgot which book it was or which character, where department submitted the request form after the book was already written and drawn and ready to go to print. It's like you submitted when it was done.
Really? Okay.
And the word got back as that character's dead.
No. Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
It happens. So you can see how maybe there was a structure to keep continuity intact, but as it goes along, somewhere along the line, people don't care anymore, so it starts kind of falling apart.
Sure.
Yeah, they wrote a story. I think it was a major villain too, or someone that they wanted to use, and now the villain's dead.
Okay, yeah, that can be a little bit of an issue.
Yeah, so somewhere in there, the strict system they used to keep everything together was not implemented properly anymore, and I really don't think they even do it now anymore.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
The other issue that you have to think about with that is every time they try to reboot a character in order to try to match modern day sensibilities, it's hard to be able to maintain the core nature of who that hero is, and then also be able to bring him into the new environment.
Sure.
I think Spider-Man has been very successful with that.
Yes.
You know, he's changed a lot as a character and how we perceive him. He was far more nerdy, a little bit more sarcastic, and with some of the more new interpretations,
Yes.
he's very different.
Well, Spider-Man works, I think, better because his core value is not a very big, overarching thing that has even, say, something like political ties.
Right. Like Superman.
Superman, well, not even Captain America being a much, much clearer one. Because Captain America was created in World War II almost as a propaganda comic book character.
Right. Makes sense.
So his value was very specific when it's created. Spider-Man's character value is just great power come with great responsibility, and that kind of transcends through generation and time. So he's much easier for people to grasp, and to kind of update and move over. Batman is similar in that sense, where he just wants to avenge his parents' death.
Right.
So these are a much easier character motivation to kind of restructure and to kind of tailor around the environment and do.
Okay.
But for Captain America, it was difficult because there are periods when you read the comic book where it's just kind of a mess.
Sure.
A more notable time period would be after World War II was over and we were transitioning to the Cold War era. The character went from this, all patriotic, let's fight the Nazi, fight the Axis and the Central Power, to, now fighting communism in that period. And because that was sort of a period of paranoia, if you ever read those books that were published, the character wasn't even like Captain America at all. Like, he was being paranoid about, like, normal American citizens, being a threat to America. And that is very un-Captain America-like.
Sure. Makes sense. When you think about that, too, some of the more recent characters that were created in the 90s, like Deadpool, I feel, since he's much more recent, it's a lot easier for them to be able to make sure that he can stay, true to his original self.
Yes.
And the most recent movies, I think, did a really excellent job of capturing that.
Deadpool is very easy to translate over because he's a character that's a parody.
Yes.
It was created as a parody, and his stories and his motivations to parody the entire comic book industry.
Yes.
So it's not that difficult for him to translate that character and make fun of something that's happening right now, which is what you've seen in the two Deadpool movies. He made fun of the superhero landing, which was literally created in the Iron Man movie.
It was pretty awesome.
Yeah. So that's an easy idea to translate over. But as you mentioned even before, a character like Superman, a little bit more difficult. What do we perceive as truth, justice, and the American ways now? It becomes very murky, with political correctness, with sort of the party infighting and all that kind of stuff. It affects the way people perceive what is American.
Absolutely.
So that makes it harder to kind of shift around. The movies, I think, did a pretty good job by making him very, very traditional. Like he's a character that didn't really change from the 40s,
right?
And embodies sort of this glamorized, romanticized idea of what America was.
Right. So
they kept him intact that way. They didn't really try to change him to the modern time.
Sure.
They made sure the modern time kind of revolved around him a little bit.
Right.
And that's one way to make a character work. So it's not impossible to continue these characters. You just have to be very careful and observant of what's going on and make the characters, either fit into the environment or make the environment kind of move a little bit around them and not impact it directly.
Right, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So why do we have so many issues nowadays with characters doing things that are very outside of their, known perception of what they perceive as good?
Well, that goes exactly back to what I said before about the Spider-Man actor saying, I would not do that if I were Spider-Man.
Right.
I think a lot of these people who write them today says, well, this is what I would do, so I'm going to put this into a known character.
Right.
And their own moral value and the way they manage a situation that's life and death probably wouldn't match up to what those heroes are.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Not writing heroes like heroes is the problem. We're also in a strange post 9/11 era.
Right.
Where a lot of the if you look at movies before then, where it's very America gung ho, we can solve every problem because of September 11. We can't really solve problems anymore the way we used to easily. America was hit directly, so that also became a huge sort of shadow that casted over superhero characters as well.
Right.
Where they put out issues. They did put out issue back then, September 11. Where you have like every Marvel character crying and upset over the World Trade Center falling apart. Like that was Marvel, I think, making a very direct political statement. In its own comic book, which was something they used to kind of skirt around.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So September 11 changed the way comic book operated as well.
Sure. If you look at some characters, let's say the X-Men versus Fantastic Four versus the Avengers,
Yes.
they all exist in the same universe.
Yes.
But sometimes it can be a little bit difficult, in my opinion, to sort of understand why some characters aren't acting in other situations. And so, like, for example, what's the difference between a mutant and then a superhero? And why are the Avengers not always just getting involved in the issues with the X-Men? Because theoretically, they should be interacting because they live in the same places.
Well, it gets harder and harder to tell them apart too,
Right.
Because there's so many characters being created. As opposed to back then, I think when Marvel started between the 60s and the 80s,
Right.
there was still a easily identifiable handful of characters.
Right.
You say Spider-Man, Hulk, Captain America, Iron Man, Wolverine, Cyclops. You can get a mental image what these characters look like.
Sure.
Now they have some X-Men or Avenger character they mention. I go, I don't even know
Who's that?
Yeah, who is that? What the heck is that? There's so many splinter, tiny little ideas that are not even a sort of a wide net of who they are.
You're right.
I think that's problematic too. There's so many characters out there. Where do you put the focus on?
Makes sense.
You know.
One of the reasons why I think the comic book industry was able to stave off a lot of these issues for so long is because comics as a medium, they afford themselves a certain number of specialties, I guess.
Sure.
So number one, you don't have to deal with actors. You don't have to worry about them aging or having
Yes.
contracts.
Yes.
You own the property, therefore
Yes.
you can draw them however it needs to be. Additionally, the budget is significantly smaller.
Yes.
And so the turnaround time is much easier.
Oh, yeah.
And you can sort of adjust the art to whatever it needs to be. So the industry is constantly changing. Every new year that comes around, there's better technology. And I think that definitely can affect how people are working through the issues of being able to create comics, right?
Yes, creating comic book characters, telling interesting stories. I mean, you can't deny that Spider-Man went from a time where they pick up one of those big old black phones, when they call it that to dial somebody, to now he's definitely carrying a cell phone.
Sure.
Same thing with Batman, all that kind of stuff. So yes, these characters, and they can slip into these different eras without any problem. And I think the real challenge is really based upon the creators and the writers and the artists to say, okay, how can we carefully maneuver these characters into this new era,
Right.
into new technology, into even a new political, climate,
Sure.
without detonating the characters themselves and blow them up.
Makes sense.
I think that's a very, very key, a line of thought that they have to come in with. I think just as any kind of creative work, there has to be, effort and care,
Makes sense.
and sort of the love for the character to come through, for people to accept them when you change them, and the change can sometimes be very drastic. You can actually write a story about Spider-Man killing somebody, maybe by accident, or maybe being enraged, and he has to deal with the consequences.
Right.
And that's an interesting concept they've never explored. You can write a story about the X-Men. Suddenly now the humans are embracing them, because look how these kind of civil rights movement has occurred across the world.
It's been very successful.
Yeah, it's successful. Sometimes little by little. Why can't the mutants be accepted? Why don't we do a story about that?
Right.
So I think there are plenty of stories that can be told. I just think you have to really put your mind at it and says, what is it that would be interesting?
Sure.
And to move these characters into this kind of setting, this kind of mindset, this kind of bigger idea. But the real challenge is at the end that as a writer, you also have to provide a solution. When you discuss a problem, you have to discuss a solution.
Sure.
In your story. And you can't discuss a good enough solution then you're just raising problem for the sake of raising the problem.
Right.
And then you can't really elevate the character because they're heroes. They're supposed to be a representation of the best of the best.
Right.
If you cannot come up with a better solution for these characters, then I think it's that's where your stories have the very, very tricky chance of just slipping, falling off the cliff.
Right, makes sense.
Yeah.
It can be very difficult to be able to put that all together.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's a very important thing to talk about and
Sure.
consider. In our next video, I
Mm-hmm.
hope to be able to talk a little bit more about the comic book industry and how it is at this exact moment.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that a lot of characters really aren't being made. Quite often, we're landing on legacy characters and hoping to allow them to be able to carry us
Yes.
forward. And so talking a little bit more about why that is and
Mm-hmm.
some of the normative things that we can do to hopefully improve and change that.
Sure, we can definitely do that.
Absolutely. All right, guys.
All right.
Thank you so much for watching, and we'll
Yeah.
see you again soon.
See you next time, folks.
Bye.